Hi, my name is Attorney Walter Ruth, not the third, and I'm going to be going through a speech that was probably, if not the greatest speech that has ever happened in America. It changed America completely. And here's why. Now, I've read this speech many times. I read it originally before I went to college. I remember reading it when I was in high school. I remember reading it when I was in middle school. I remember reading it after college, before my master's, after my master's, before my doctorate, after my doctorate, before my law firm, and then deep in the thicket of the law firm, and just recently again. Every time I read it, you know it is a brilliant piece of work when it means something new to you every time you go back to it. Because it reaches down to the fundamental humanistic qualities that make us who we are. Now, I need to make you aware of something. I wanted to use a quote from this speech in the trailer for spaceconstitution.com. I kept putting quotes in, but they were way too massive. I wanted to use a big paragraph. I wanted it to be the big quote, all of these things. And then I realized that I didn't get it. I just couldn't fit it in because I wanted too much of it. So we're doing something special here instead. I'm going to go ahead and read you my version of this speech, what it means to me, and why it is incredibly important. It's not going to have the great booming voice. It's not going to have this, fire and passion. But it'll give you an analytical knowledge into why it is more relevant today than maybe even back in the day. And at the end of it, I'm going to show you the opening trailer for spaceconstitution.com, the first truly open source website for constitutional law that allows anybody to write in whatever laws and freedoms they feel humans should have on Earth and beyond. The whole idea is to create future constitutions that are even better than what we have now on Earth. Let's get to it. Martin Luther King, 1963, the I Have a Dream speech. I'm going to read to you directly from it, and then I'll go into why a particular section is correct, different, or why I disagree with it or why I like it. I'm now going to go into detail specifically for the speech which is known as I Have a Dream speech, which is not the most important part of this speech, and I'll go into why. Here we go. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. All about Abe Lincoln. He was a big fan of our founding fathers and our greatest presidents. Okay? This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of African American slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. That means fried quickly. That means they got off the boat and they were instant slaves for the rest of their lives. It came as joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. The long night. The long expanse of their slavery. Remember, this country came into existence in 1776, and 1863, that's when Abe Lincoln, Emancipation Proclamation, and that's 100 years before the 1963 of basically Martin Luther King giving his speech. It's not that long ago. It's just not. Think about that. 1963. That's not that long ago. That's like 100 years from Abe Lincoln. Just think about that for a moment. 100 years from Abe Lincoln. So 10 generations of humans since Abe Lincoln. Boom, there you are. Less than that. 5 or 6, maybe 7, maybe top 7 generations from current day back to Martin Luther King. 5 or 6. But 100 years later, okay, so from 1863 to 1963, to the current 1963, the time when the speech was going on, the African American still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the African American is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. Being that the intention of the Emancipation Proclamation was to create equal standing ground for all skin colors. 100 years later, the African American lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Think about that. That's almost like talking about foreign worlds. They were brought to a foreign world, great prosperity around them, that which they could not tap into. Sounds like lots of poor people today, right? Sounds like most disabled people today. Sounds like lots of retired people today, right? 100 years later, the African American is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. Own land, that's important. There is no attachment to being an African American and wanting to be in Africa. It is direct attachment to, I'm only using African American here because he used a very different word that people get offended by, which is ridiculous. But he's saying own land. He is saying my land, just like your land, equal footing, we both step on the same footprints of the sandy beach. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. Think about that, dramatize. He's breaking the third wall in film, right? In cinema. He's breaking that wall where he's saying, we're not here just because we're here. He's saying we're here to dramatize what has happened throughout history to our people. We are creating a moment outside of the great suffering that we've gone through. And that dramatization of the shameful condition that African Americans were put through is what he's trying to highlight here through breaking that third wall. It's raining outside. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. Now, I want to stop here. This is the beginning of the E equals MC square of speeches. Now, if you don't know what that means, a brilliant Jewish person, great guy, scientist, may have flipped many aspects of World War II so that America had a chance to go ahead and compete against these nations that were trying to destroy the world. His name was Einstein. Good guy. Well, E equals MC squared was part of one of his many great theories that keeps turning out to be true in many regards. It was a huge scientific achievement. It was doctrinal theory at its base fundamental understanding for something that is beyond humans' traditional ability. E equals MC squared. Einstein. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. This is the beginning. This is the E of that equation. That's how brilliant this is. He took something, Martin Luther King, that was so incredibly complex and made it stupid simple so that anybody could get it. Do you realize how brilliant you have to be to take something as complex as constitutional law and make it so simple? Let's read on. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. E equals MC squared. America is promising these people something. And these people with a check in their hand are going to America saying, I would like you to cash this check. And I would like my freedoms, my rights in return. And think about that. How incredibly simple is that? A transaction. You usually get money. But this is greater than money. This is quite literally the foundation of why America gets to call itself a free nation. Without that check that a human hand hands to the government with the expectation of receiving something back, there is no free nation. That is why this is the most brilliant portion of the speech. Because it not only applies to one group of people, it applies to all people. Those who are suffering in this country, those who suffered in the past, those who will suffer in the future, those in other countries that don't have the same rights. He understood something very simple. And you only get that way through seeing and being a part of suffering. And what he saw was that people were losing their rights and freedoms through inequality in its application. And he wanted that stopped. It's brilliant. I want to point something out too here. 1963. Who do you think had more rights and freedoms in 1963? Do you think I have more rights and freedoms nowadays? Or do you think he had more rights and freedoms back then? On paper, Martin Luther King in 1963 had more rights and freedoms than I do, or any of the people watching this right now do. Think about that. We've lost that many rights and freedoms that the person who created the most brilliant freedoms and rights speech in American history had more than we do today due to our incompetence and our inability to fix the politicians that erode what is ours. Let's go back to it. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men and as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable, same thing as inalienable, rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, equal footing, held by all to live a good life. The only point of the government is to provide safety for the people, which is why the people create the government. Otherwise, the government has no purpose. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. And nowadays, it's everybody. White, black, Asian, everybody. Everybody has lost rights. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, giving back the rights and freedoms to the person who originally gave the check to the government, America has given the African American people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. This is a brilliant speech. Taking something so incredibly difficult to conceive and making it that simple. I mean, it's stupid simple to the point where anybody could understand it. And that's what's brilliant about it. That's why E equals MC squared is so incredible. It's such a beautiful little thing. It's stupid simple. It's just a beautiful little thing. And yet it explains the complexity of something far beyond what most people can even render in their imagination. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. Now, when he says the Bank of Justice, what he means is the legislative group, the judicial group, the executive group, all the administrative functions, all the agencies. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. Because they're not. They hold all the rights and freedoms that we allow them to hold. They're not in charge of us. We are in charge of them. If they've been in there for 50 years, that's a problem. They shouldn't be that comfortable, and they shouldn't be that relaxed, and there shouldn't be that many deals that they have to pay forward, and there shouldn't be that many deals that are owed to them. Think about that. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. Beautiful line. And so we've come to cash this check. A check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Security of justice. riches of freedom. Equality, equity, freedom, justice, all these things available in America, not available in other countries. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Not a threat, but definitely a poke. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time. Now, sunlit path, heavenly, lights on, Omega, God, erase segregation. That's the point. Which is very counter, by the way, to the modern Democrat. I prefer the classical Democrat by my standards. To lift our nation from the quick sands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Think about that. Think about that right there. He's saying he wants everybody on equal footing as brothers in arms for justice, for freedoms and rights. He wants everybody on equal footing. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Everybody, every country, every human being. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. Giving a little bit of fire here. This sweltering summer of the African Americans' legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. Cool little playing, summer versus autumn. Very well done. Okay? 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Right? That's the year. It's not an end, it's beginning. It's getting fiery, right? It's starting to heat up. Those who hope that the African American needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. That's a threat. And that's the amazing thing about it, is that this is a potential violence threat. That's what this basically is. You know, number 45 made less aggressive comments in this, and he's facing potential charges and lawsuits that are not going to go anywhere. But, you know, here it is, the greatest speech in American history. There's a threat. Those who hope that the African American needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. It's a threat. Maybe not a threat of violence, but that's the brilliance of this. Let's keep reading. Now he gets fired up. All right, here. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the African American is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. The whirlwinds of revolt. The whirlwinds of revolt. I mean, this is flat out beyond what, President number 45 did. So it makes you wonder, who's pulling all these strings to make you feel emotionally this and emotionally that? When the greatest, let's call it like it is, it's the best speech that America has when it comes to rights and freedoms. It is. It's the best one. And there it is. And I stare right at it. The words, the whirlwinds of revolt. Talking about revolt. Revolt will come unless justice emerges. I don't think that's wrong to write that. I don't think what he did here was incorrect. I think there should be revolt if they continue to try and take more rights and more freedoms from the American people. A revolt doesn't have to be violent. It has certainly been violent in the past with the American people. The American people revolted against the Nazi parties of World War II. The American people, many times, have revolted against the British, any and all foreign nations. We've even revolted against ourselves to try and figure out what we are as a nation. Why are we demonizing revolts? Are they really that bad? Does it take a revolt to really get something done? Think about it. Think about it. Let your brain process it and say, how do we get things done in this country? Because I don't know about you, but it feels like every day I wake up, there's a leash around my neck and a politician is pulling me by the lead line. That's what I feel is going on. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. So now he's saying, instead of riot, he's saying, don't do illegal actions, because that will only make our position seem evil, seem wrong. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. Beautiful line. Absolutely incredibly beautiful line. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom, to riot, to be aggressive, to be mean, to be a fighter, by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. Beautiful. So what he did with it is he said he gave the fire, and then he dialed it back and said we can only make this happen if we do it the right way. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity, very nicely worded, and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Well put. So where he threatens potential riot, he pulls it back and says, we got to do this the right way. No violence. Now, obviously, there were tons and tons of riots back then. A lot of the schools don't teach that, but if you go back and look, every time there was an event like this, there were massive riots. And he's trying to correct that here. This is many, many speeches in. This is when he has become a legend, speech after speech after speech. And he's saying, everybody watch out, because if you don't allow us to have this, bad things are going to happen. And then he talks to his people and says, but we got to do this the right way. No violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. Now, when I read this, and I've read this many times, I've always skipped over this part because I didn't understand what soul force was. And then I looked it up online, and I realized that nobody does. Nobody does. And another thing I don't really like is that black scholars somehow get more, I'm more knowledgeable on the subject of this particular individual than white scholars that are writing about it that have studied him all the same. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to actually have equality in research and review. And by that means you are going to give me a little bit of wiggle room to give my explanations to what soul force is. Not what they put online, not what they think it might. Hey. None of them know what it is. What he meant by this, in my opinion, is that, and let's read it again. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. That is to say that they're going to take the brunt, they're going to take the hits, but their soul force, being the only thing that a human being cannot take from another human being, will allow them to be on majestic heights, on a higher plane, to defend, to deflect the physical force. So think about that. Your body can be beaten and destroyed. Your mind can be corrupted and destroyed. But your soul, the base fundamental of what makes you you, you will have forever. Which means that physical force can never harm soul force. It can only harm the physical and mental aspects of a person. The marvelous new militancy, which has engulfed the African American community, must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. AKA, guys, the whole reason I spent a lot of money and time building Space Constitution, so that we can all figure out together, and I'll read it here, have come to realize, our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize, because there were a lot of white people there, a lot of Jewish people there, all kinds of people that were there to support Martin Luther King. As evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny, everybody's destiny, is tied up with our destiny, African Americans' destiny. I want to remind you again, Martin Luther King had more freedoms and rights on the books than the average American does today. That's how many you have lost over the years. Hasn't even been 100 years yet. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We're all in the same boat. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. In this instance, turning back to slavery, turning back to what it was before, constantly marching forward with soul force. The only thing that they have that can combat physical force. Same thing of modern day. Everybody talks about the assault rifle in the hand of the person. Hey, the military in the United States has goggles that can see through walls, has drones that are smaller than a hair. What does an assault rifle have as a presence in a military fashion against the toys of the United States military? They're nothing. Any and all of these guns could hardly do anything to them. They're nothing. They're just nothing. The rounds that are piercing for this and that, exploding to... We don't have that stuff for the most part. I mean, yeah, we have some of those armor piercing, but we don't have exploding to... We don't have the stuff to fight the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army would crush the American people, and they know it. And they know it. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? Right? That's where people are asking to him, when will you be satisfied? When will you have enough? We can never be satisfied as long as the African American is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Sound familiar today, guys? Huh? We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the African American's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating "for whites only." Think about that. He's talking about all of the things that can be taken from a person. But there's only one thing that can't, which is the soul, which is why he says up here, meeting physical force with soul force. We cannot be satisfied as long as the African American in Mississippi cannot vote, and an African American in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Keeping in mind, he was a reverend, which means that he's going to go to those specific classic words that we traditionally hear coming from that genre of religious, freedoms and how God treats us and wants us to be happy and how God will help us through things. There's another thing here too. Well, I'll go into it. I'll go back here because I want to make this video somewhat fast. No, 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 we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls. Justice is rolling down like waters. We got a stream somewhere, and righteousness like a mighty stream. This is in reference to a very, very, very famous Jewish event, where, as you know, a Pharaoh was coming to get a whole bunch of people, and the river was split in half. God's justice to allow those people to go through, and then the river closed. Think about that. That's what he's saying here. Justice down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream that would swoop in to take the Pharaoh's army. He's taking care of the Jewish people in that sentence. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. That's such an interesting way to put that. You've been the veterans, so you put up with a lot of it, of creative suffering. And I think what he's trying to get at there when he says creative suffering, he's trying to say, these people are constantly trying to innovate new ways to put you down. You're veterans of it. You've been through it over and over and over again. And what he's now about to go into is basically how to be strong, how to hold and rise. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Let's go back through that. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. You guys know what that means. That's pretty straightforward. But the bottom line is unearned suffering is redemptive. Continue to work with the faith. He's talking about those who have suffered, those who haven't suffered. Which is redemptive? Which equates to redemption? Is it just unearned suffering? Is it fully reached suffering? Is it near loss of life suffering? Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Okay, so what he's doing here is he's giving people the future. He's giving them the reality that they are fighting for something that can and will change, being that equality, rights, and freedoms will be equally applied to all skin color. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. And now this is the part that everybody remembers, but this isn't even the really good part, which is what annoys me. But you pick out which part is you. He's talking about a hypothetical. That's all this is. It's a hypothetical. And I understand why people like it, because it's something that they can easily visualize. But this isn't the important part of this speech. It's just something that people can easily visualize, and that's why they grabbed onto it and said, oh, that's the I have a dream speech. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. That's talking about that check. They have a promissory note where they owe everybody rights and freedoms. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Sound familiar? It should. Came from Thomas Jefferson, Declaration of Independence. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Now, as a Mason, this to me has higher significance than to most people, because of the identity of sitting down with your fellow brothers and being able to help them and bring light to their life. And guess what? When you look him up, He's actually got some ties back to what were traditionally Masonic lodges, but for the African American community, which were the Prince lodges. And for that reason, it's interesting. I think that he had some influence here in relation to that. So now we go to the big. Then we go to the part that everybody remembers. Oh, we're almost there. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream, the most famous line is coming. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. The truth is, that's just a hypothetical. But what's interesting about it is the way he put it. It's something that is not attainable today. It's something that requires the future. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. He talked about riots in the beginning. And they said, well, we can't do that. We got to do it the right way. We have to make sure our cause is just. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. What do we see in modern America? Everybody's getting judged by the color of their skin. We need reparations here. We need these people to suffer more because of this. These people aren't getting that. These people aren't getting that. It's all color of their skin. It's not even about culture anymore. It's just color of the skin. Color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that is the truth of people to sit down and believe in the person that is in front of them as an ally and a friend without requiring their skin color to be something that makes them see otherwise. You know, when you look at the military people and they go into a battle, they're wearing all their fatigues, their helmet, all this stuff. Soldier 1 is relying on Soldier 2 to cover him, fire on the enemy, to be able to be a brother in arms. That is the judging of the content of their character. The character of that person, to have the back of that person, is far more important than the color of the skin of that other person. That's what he's getting at here. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. I don't know if you guys know interposition. It just means like interference with like opposition. That's all that means. One day, right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. He's saying he has a dream right now. He's saying it's a dream today. He's saying it's a dream that in the future will not be a dream, it will be reality. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Exalted just means like held in high regard. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. There's a lot there. Let me explain what just happened. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. All the low places will be held in high regard. So all the people down here will be held up here. And every hill and mountain shall be made low. All the people up here will be held here. And rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. The people who are rough and the people who are crooked will be made to be good people. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. Now, hew out just means to like pick something out, to like pick it out, you know, like you're carving it out. Despair, a stone of hope. Now, look, this is going to sound a little bit, geeky, but this is what I think of when I think of the Arkenstone. You know what I mean? Like Lord of the Rings stuff. When I think of like the Arkenstone, a Hobbit, and his journey, his wonderful little fun time, I think of the Arkenstone. The Arkenstone is a singular stone that every mountain has. That is basically the soul, the most important aspect of the mountain. It's indestructible. So let me read it again. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords, jangling means like off-key, of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. Everybody singing together, one symphony, we're all in this together. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. That's beautiful. Didn't happen, but it's beautiful. What we have today is lots of injustice to the American people. American people are fighting amongst each other. Race is included in that. The only people who are doing exceptionally well are the politicians. They have special health programs. They have special pay. They get paid whether they work or not. The enemy of the people are the politicians. Think about that. Who really has it good in this nation? Frontline workers? Company owners? Media outlets? Farmers? Welders? Electricians? Lawyers? Doctors? Accountants? Who's really got it good? Where's the money really going? How many houses do these people have in other countries? Well, that would be the politicians, good sir. That would be the politicians. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. So now we've gone through this idea. We've talked about where he stated that we could be in jail together, we could struggle together, but we could be on even footing, equal standing. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. It was the fundamental founding aspect of it. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. And prodigious just means super great. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. You don't usually see curvaceous used in that. It's kind of a neat, But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. Freedom, it trumps everything. It's more important than any politician. It's more important than any human. It is one of the basic fundamental things that is an inalienable right. It is a by God right, an omega right, a right of the highest level due to living beings. The man asked for equality of rights given to people of different skin colors equally. He didn't ask for more. He didn't ask for this, that, and that, this, that, because he knew that's not how you get people to respect each other. You can't imbalance it in the extreme other way to go ahead and basically create the middle ground. Everybody must come to the middle. The highest mountains, the lowest valleys. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, we will let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old African American spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. August 28th, 1963. 5 or 6 generations ago. I have a truck that is older than this speech. I have a piano that is significantly older than this speech. Almost goes back to the time of the Proclamation by Abe Lincoln. You know, when you've got something great, people tend to hang on to it. I ask of you to learn from the E equals MC squared version of American speeches. I ask you to understand that he was talking about using the freedoms and creating equality for everyone through them. I'm going to ask you for something significantly more than that. I'm going to ask you to help the entire human race with creating the future laws, the future freedoms that we can use to define how our government will be controlled by its people. I want you to understand something. We are going to be spacefaring in the next couple of years. It is 2021. By 2024, we will be on Mars. By 2030, we will be on other planets. By 2040, we will have generations of people living and creating colonies on these other planets. The distance of time between this video right now and the speech that he gave in 1963 is greater than the distance of time then we will see people living in massive quantities of colonies on foreign planets. The time between now and Martin Luther King's speech is very small, but the time between now and massive colonies on foreign planets, even smaller. So I'm going to give you something right now. I've spent all the money. I've spent all the hours. It's right now 1:14 a.m. I still have to record a bunch of videos after this. I'm going to give you something at the end of this video. You, my friends, my subscribers, my original people that stood by me when I was just starting the channel and growing the channel, I'm giving you a first look into a pre-release of the launch trailer for Space Constitution. Right now it's at .com, but it is being set up as a non-profit 501c3 and will then be located at spaceconstitution.org. I put in a lot of money, but I put in a hell of a lot more time. It is now your turn to take up the reins and figure out, be creative, be brilliant, be generous, and be kind with the ideas for the future rights and freedoms that the human race will need on its trip through not just what Earth can give us, but all the other planets in our solar system and the cosmos. Here is the pre-release trailer for SpaceConstitution.com. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. Attorney Walter Rudolph Knott III, If you'd like to catch up with me during the live, 8 to 10 every Thursday on YouTube, Eastern Standard Time. If you'd like to, subscribe, that's totally fine. Any questions, don't be afraid to shoot me an email. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. An act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And do all this, and do it right, then we must be bold.